It's 5 p.m. I'm Zahir Kelvin Ong Abdullah, and this is Money Matters. Hello there and welcome to another episode of Money Matters. We have former International Trade and Industry Minister Tan Sri Rafidah Aziz. Tan Sri, thank you for being a part of Money Matters this evening.
Thank you for inviting me.
Okay, Tan Sri, now Malaysia has attracted FDI worth 81.9 billion ringgit from 240 countries so far this year. And according to MITI, all investments are of high quality. Despite the COVID-19 pandemic, Malaysia still appears to be a major investment destination for foreign investors. So how can local firms take advantage of this favorable investment climate, especially in areas like, technology, innovation, maybe even electric vehicles and green tech?
Well, let me put it this way. I have a different benchmark, when I quote statistics in the past about investments in this country. I only will quote those dollars and cents if there is already a memorandum of undertaking from the foreign investor or even a local investor to actually set up a joint venture or even a wholly owned business here in Malaysia. So a commitment must be translated into an actual memorandum of undertaking, not memorandum of understanding. So if you talk to me about 89 billion, I don't know how many billions, unless I see actual signature on a contract or memorandum of undertaking, it's very difficult to see whether this is going to be realized or not. Sometimes you go and see investors overseas and they say, yes, we're thinking of investing. Now, don't put that down as commitment.
Yeah, but Tan Sri, what about the areas of attracting the investors like technology?
You hear me out, because you quoted the figures 89 billion. So unless you see that realistically being on paper already committed, then we cannot quote those figures. We see sometimes, they commit in the sense that they will say, yeah, we were thinking of investing, but actually they have three other countries in the list as well.
Yeah, but again, looking at the areas, are we targeting the right areas in terms of technology, innovation, and like I mentioned, green tech as well?
Well, let me put it this way. If we keep abreast with what's happening in the world and what the marketplace needs, then we should be having a list of selected or targeted industries and sectors that we offer for investors to come into. We don't select investors, we pre-select the investments or the kind of sectors that we want investments to flow in. And we tell them what are the incentives, what are the facilities, what are the assistance or the support mechanisms that we have for these kind of investments to come here, whether they are IT-based, high-end technology, or green technology, or whatever. And so therefore, unless we have these pre-selected areas where we want investors to flow in, whether it's foreign or local, it's difficult. So in that context, if the government already has that list, well and good. But if they don't, then it's so difficult for us to convince, because many other countries that I have read about do have pre-selected areas that they are inviting investments in, especially in this region of ours.
Yeah, so is it viable for us to attract these sectors?
Well, you mentioned, IT is a very big sphere, right? IT that has got to do with manufacturing, with business, IT that's got to do with enterprises, delivery of services, IT that's got to do in even delivery of education, for example. So IT take it in the entire spectrum. So IT-based sectors of investment. And then you have technology, where the new technology is no longer of before. You're talking about the new industrial revolution, 4R and whatnot. So in other words, if we know what's happening in the marketplace and environment around us, then we should be there, knowing very well what to offer, when they come in to invest. And what I mean by offer is that you cannot treat everybody the same. In the case like when we had pioneer status before, you remember, where these companies were given different treatment from the run-of-the-mill investments because they have choices to go. And so if we can attract them by facilitating them to come here and also by giving them support facilities plus some incentives, whether it's fiscal or non-fiscal, then they'll be motivated to come here. We have the edge.
Right. Tan Sri, it's interesting you said that because there are already various incentives being offered to foreign investors to come to Malaysia. Now, this includes a 10 to 15-year tax exemption for new foreign direct investment in the manufacturing sector with capital investment of 300 million or more, and also the setting up of project acceleration and coordination. But now, the setting up of various online platforms as well, such as iIncentive. Now, what we are looking at here is, besides these current incentives, what other incentives can Malaysia offer to foreign investors? Because as you said just now, we are facing stiff competition from the rest of the other countries in the region.
Okay, first of all, why are we facing stiff competition? Facing competition is normal, but why should the competition be more stiff for us? I do believe that it's got to do with the environment within which they are going to operate. These are very important to people. They want to stay here. They want to be permanent features in the economy. If they see governments change, come in as and when you like without going through a process of elections, there is lack of confidence. So I must say that no matter what incentive you list out in the big fat book, if the government of the day, the political environment is not up to the mark, they're going to a country where you may have less incentives, but there's a stability, the confidence, the trust that they can have when they invest multi-million dollars there or billions of dollars there. To me, in my observation, and I don't think I'm wrong, because they're very sensitive, these people. They want a long tenure in a country. And with those days when the government were there for decades, they never ask this question. They just want to see the incentives, period, and the facilitation, right?
Right, Tan Sri, we've just got to go for a very quick commercial break. So we'll be right back with Tan Sri Rafidah Aziz, former Minister of International Trade and Industry, right after this. Welcome back to Money Matters. We're talking to Tan Sri Rafidah Aziz. Tan Sri, speaking about stiff competition, as we were talking about just now in the region, during your time as Minister of International Trade and Industry, Malaysia was a preferred destination for FDI in Southeast Asia. At that time, other countries in the region were not ready to host such FDI. Now, they are very aggressive in attracting FDI to their respective countries. So what will be Malaysia's competitive advantage now as compared to before?
Our competitive advantage still remains, We are a regional hub. We've got a foundation for being a regional hub. And as I've said before, they know very well what our incentives are. When you go to the region, they see countries around us that are more stable. And you don't have this political infighting. You don't have this political musical chairs happening. I mean, to me, people have to spend money, when they come and invest here. They don't want to put money where they do not know what happens at the end of the year, for example. So let's think again.
Right. So now, moving forward, Tan Sri, in moving forward for the nation, while the pandemic is being managed, a national recovery plan was unveiled and currently being implemented. Now, you have called for the government to reintegrate the nation, especially the economy, into regional and global markets. Now, how can this be done?
I tell you, the National Recovery Plan has only focused on COVID recovery, getting out of the COVID. I've always mentioned that is only one aspect of the recovery. That has to be done, of course, but it has to be done in parallel at the same time as the national recovery in other areas, economic sector, the social sector, the education sector, the healthcare sector. And unless you do the second portion in parallel, when you do have that situation later on, God willing, when COVID is managed, it won't go away, it'll still be there, but managed, it'll remain just as a residual, we hope, then we are well prepared with having investments come in, with education ready to go in the new normal, and the marketplace, the small and medium enterprises and so on are geared up to participate in the new normal economic environment. Our education, as I've said, would have been revamped in terms of delivery of the education to both primary, secondary, and tertiary and higher education in context of new normal, changing of the way the system is being education has been delivered. And most importantly, because COVID has also had very severe health and mental aspects in terms of negative impact, whether the healthcare area, the mental care area, and that social well-being area has been looked at very seriously now, moving forward, so that by the time the COVID is managed, the country as a whole begins to recover.
Right, but the thing is, Tan Sri, the thing is, the COVID situation now has to be managed, like you mentioned, in tandem with economic recovery.
No, not to say in tandem. That to be managed in tandem, you also have to manage the rest. I'm not saying which is more important. Together, and because you can do it, because we have so many ministries, you have so many ministers, deputy ministers, and what have you, and professionals and representatives of businesses and so on who can input, add value to the thinking processes, how to move forward.
Okay, let's move on to what you have spoken about, the need to provide employment opportunities, especially amongst those retrenched due to closures of businesses. Yes. With the Pemulih package, Tan Sri, Malaysians stand to benefit from 180,000 new job placements. Now, existing programs such as e-Rezeki and Glow will also be improvised to assist more than, I think, 20,000 job seekers in the gig economy. So, in your opinion, what other measures can be taken to assist those who have lost their jobs during the pandemic?
Well, first of all, you have to analyze. When you talk about retrenchments, lost their jobs, find out who have lost their jobs, who have lost their livelihood. The difference between losing jobs and losing livelihoods. You can say that those people who are own account workers, they have lost livelihoods because they are working on their own. They have little stalls, they have little shops. The ones who lose their jobs are the ones who are employed, all right? And which means it's a business entity. So you have to give different kinds of assistance for these to survive. their own account worker, they don't need the same treatment as a company with 50 workers, whose workers have been retrenched simply because of the lockdowns, and the owner can no longer afford, because they can't open the factory, they can't afford to sustain the employers on the payroll, or even they have retrenched at zero income, for example, but just keep on the payroll list, so to speak, without any or actual payment. So you have to analyze. There's no point telling, oh, 500 people, 500,000 or whatever. Has somebody analyzed this? I've talked about it a long time ago. Even last year, you have to do this. The impact of COVID as we go on. Even things like mental stress, suicides, 400 over in the last few months. I mean, this never happened in this country before, which means there is this manifestation of mental health issues, right? Which is not something you should take lightly. And the socioeconomic impact on families, on children, and women. Now, somebody must have done this study already. I'm not talking about doing it. If we're saying we're going to do it tomorrow or next week, or when this recovery plan, whatever committee, we're a bit too late.
Right. Tan Sri, you have to hold that thought. We've just got to go for another commercial break. Stay with us as we are talking to Sri Rafidah Aziz, and we'll see you shortly. Welcome back to Money Matters. Now, Tan Sri, before we went for the break, you were talking about unemployment. And just to mention to you as well, we've had guests on the program talking about how companies have to basically re-look at the whole strategy for their companies in terms of reskilling and training. So in terms of this, of course, it will take money as well. So what's the viability for this, especially where gig economy also is concerned?
I tell you what, before I answer that question, I just wanted to follow up from what I said just now. I would like to propose to the cabinet, all right, for the Prime Minister and the cabinet to instruct every minister to do within the next 3 months, before the year is out, the next 3 months, 1 month is a bit too short for them, next 3 months, how each ministry is going to propose moving forward in their area as per the needs and the problems of their various stakeholders. We have the Trade Industry Minister, the Community Development Minister, Women's Affairs, we have Education Ministries, we have ministries in charge of the primary commodities, and so on and so on. Don't look at it in total like that. It is difficult, but if you ask every minister to do it, sit down and think. If we don't even hear ministers talking about this, start this Monday if you can. Have within your own industry, calling your own stakeholders outside, and prepare within 3 months how this country is moving forward in the area that is within your particular jurisdiction.
Right.
Listen me out. I don't like just talk and touch and go manner. This has to be done seriously. Otherwise, we're talking like this in the year 2022. So if you talk about recovery, this is like the whole body is sick, So every finger, every toe, every ear will have to be looked at. So please, let's be serious about it. All the ministers now get to work. And if you are a minister in charge of primary commodities, look at how that sector has been affected. How do you move forward? Whether you want to use technology, whether you want to use foreign workers, whatever. Right. The same with education and so on. Unless you do that, nothing that is practicable, nothing that will actually input or add value to the country will happen. Trust me, because I know how it works.
Right.
This high-end meeting, I call it high-end, right up there in the sky, with few people meeting. Who does the work, you think? Not these people that you appoint to the council, the ones in the ministry. The council can say, okay, we want this to be the education. Who actually does the work?
Yes.
So
does this tie up with the National Recovery Plan, Tan Sri? Because they've also announced that, in terms of engaging people from the private sector, NGOs, and economic and social and health experts, they've also invited the opposition to actually sit on this council.
It does not matter. Let me put this way. Be realistic about it. Get people who can move things forward. There may be opposition, maybe these people you don't like their faces, but their brains matter. People whom you like may not input well into it. Come on, let's be realistic for the country, not for your glamour or for your shot sendiri. I'm sorry, I'm very blunt about this because it's my country too. Unless we do this seriously, with a strong motivation to do something that can realize good for the country and people, don't do it. This is not the time for lip service. So I'm telling you, if the government does not direct ministries and ministers to do that, because you have deputy ministers, task them to then engage whoever it needs to be engaged. And from this, you get the way forward.
Right.
Everybody doesn't know, but if you get collectively, you can add value to every move you make forward.
Right, Tan Sri. Now, moving on to Malaysia's COVID-19 vaccination drive, which basically got off to a slow start, but things basically have ramped up dramatically this month. As you can see, it's about 400,000 vaccinations a day, which, is very good for the rakyat. So, in fact, Malaysia's daily rate is now higher than the fastest rate recorded in many countries, including the United States. So, with the nation's target of achieving herd immunity by the end of this year, what do you think will the economic and trade outlook be in 2022 based on this?
No, you cannot have an outlook based on the herd immunity, blah, blah, blah. It's based on how the economy recovers. You may have people recovering, because of vaccination, but the small businesses have gone out of business. And it is assumed that about how many thousand by the Small Industries Association will go out of business completely by end of October. The figures are all there, I don't have to repeat. How many will go out of employment, SMEs? You see, the value chain, the production value chain, have a lot of people, entities inside there. You have to check which entities are affected to what extent. Unless you remedy all those damages as a result of the pandemic and the lockdowns, you can't actually revive the economy in the way that we want it.
Tan Sri,
so please do that.
Final question. Now, the pandemic emphasizes the dire need to revive the economy and sustain socioeconomic growth, as you mentioned. Now, this is a very interesting question for you. If you were a cabinet minister now, how would you basically plan, strategize, and execute this national agenda in the short term?
I tell you what happened. The Prime Minister, every evening at 5 o'clock, has a small group of people. I was one of them. Bank Negara Governor, Finance Minister, and 2 or 3 other key people who we call from time to time. Every evening at 5 o'clock, we were in the Prime Minister's room evaluating what had transpired during the day and the day before. And for me, as a minister, every morning before that 5 o'clock, I was having dialogues. I mean, endless dialogues, morning till afternoon, and then just in time to go to see the Prime Minister's office, to be in the Prime Minister's office. And that dialogue enabled me to get a feedback how badly impacted certain economic sectors were in terms of trade and industry. And I reported. And that allowed that committee, the Prime Minister's committee, to undertake measures that help these people. Why do you think that we were able to do dana modal, dana harta, all that, you know, in quite a short time, that allowed recapitalization of banks, that allowed the handling management of non-performing loans, and most importantly, to revitalize the economy, because it back from the shareholders. So we, as ministers, during the day, at least for me, we met the shareholders without fail every day. Can you imagine how tiring that is? 5 o'clock in the evening, we then summarize the feedback from the governor and everybody, and we summarize, okay, move forward, and what was our the impact of what we already have put in place. And that allowed us, in the shortest time possible, be the first nation to get back on the growth track. We were minus growth, you know, we shrank, the economy shrank, but we were the first in the region to go back on the growth track.
Right. Tan Sri, unfortunately, that's all the time we have. Thank you very much for joining us on this episode of Money Matters. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And thank you, the viewers, for watching. As Malaysians, we need to put our differences aside and fight the common enemy, which is the pandemic COVID-19, because the pandemic does not discriminate. I'm Zahir Kelvin Ong Abdullah. Till next time, stay safe.